The emergency alarms had been screaming across the Galactic Council chambers for 6 hours straight. Representatives from 47 different species crowded the circular hall, their voices creating a cacophony that would have shattered human eardrums. At the center platform stood the Council Arbiter, a tall being whose species had maintained peace for 3 centuries, and even he looked shaken. "The vote is final," he announced, his voice cutting through the noise. "The Rilthani worlds are hereby declared a permanent quarantine zone. No ship enters, no ship leaves. Any vessel attempting to breach the boundary will be destroyed without warning." In the observation gallery, Ambassador Rebecca Okonkwo gripped the railing hard enough to make her knuckles white. She had watched the proceedings with growing horror as species after species voted to abandon the Rilthani. Not a single voice had argued for attempting a cure. Not one had suggested sending medical aid. They had simply decided that the fungal plague spreading through Rilthani space was too dangerous, too unpredictable, and the easiest solution was to seal it away and forget about it. 40 light-years away on Rilthan Prime, families gathered around communication devices to hear their fate. The Rilthani were a species known throughout the galaxy for their crystalline cities that sang in the wind, and their ability to communicate through harmonic frequencies that could express emotions human words never could. Now those same voices trembled with fear. A young Rilthani named Talara sat with her parents in their dwelling, watching her mother's hands shake uncontrollably. The plague had started with small tremors, barely noticeable at first. Within weeks it progressed to full neural degeneration. Victims lost control of their bodies while their minds remained horrifyingly aware. The mortality rate was 94%. Medical facilities across the planet were overwhelmed. Supplies were running out, and now the galaxy had voted to let them die alone. "They are sealing us in," Talara's father said, his harmonic voice breaking into dissonant notes. 3 generations we served the Council. We paid our dues, we followed their laws, we contributed to galactic science and art. And this is how they repay loyalty. Talara watched through the window as automated defense satellites began appearing in orbit. Sleek and deadly, they would ensure no Rilthani ship ever left the system. The quarantine wasn't just medical protocol. It was a death sentence for an entire civilization. Back in the council chambers, representatives were already discussing how to reroute trade lanes around Rilthani space. Some talked about the resources that could be salvaged from the system after the plague ran its course. Others debated whether to keep monitoring the quarantine zone or simply forget it existed. No one mentioned the millions of living, breathing, thinking beings trapped inside. Rebecca had heard enough. She activated her communication badge and requested immediate access to the council floor. Her request was denied. Humanity was too new to the galactic community, only 40 years as members, and junior species didn't interrupt important proceedings. But Rebecca had not come this far by following rules that let people die. She bypassed security protocols and broadcast on the emergency frequency. "This is Ambassador Rebecca Okonkwo of Earth. I invoke Humanitarian Exception Clause 7 under the Interstellar Medical Accord. The Council is obligated to attempt treatment before implementing permanent quarantine." The chamber fell silent. Several species looked confused, most looked annoyed. The Veskari representative, a creature resembling an armored centipede, spoke with barely concealed contempt. "The human reads ancient documents and finds forgotten clauses. That accord was written 2,000 years ago and has not been invoked in centuries. It does not apply here." "It applies exactly here," Rebecca shot back. "You are condemning an entire species without even trying to help them. That clause exists for this precise situation." The Arbiter's expression was unreadable. "The clause you mention requires unanimous council support to invoke. I do not believe you will find such support, Ambassador. Humanity should focus on maintaining its own standing rather than interfering in matters beyond its understanding." Rebecca felt her heart sink, but she wasn't done. She opened a direct transmission channel back to Earth, bypassing diplomatic protocols entirely. If the Council wouldn't listen, she would make sure Earth knew what was happening. On Rilthan Prime, Talara helped her mother lie down as another seizure racked her body. The plague was accelerating. Their medical centers had stopped accepting new patients because there was nothing they could do. Families were choosing to stay together in their homes, waiting for the end. Some Rilthani still believed the council would change its mind, would send help, would remember the friendship and alliance they had built over generations. Talara knew better. She had seen the vote counts. She had heard the cold calculation in their voices. The galaxy had decided the Rilthani were not worth saving. They were a problem to be contained, not people to be helped. Outside, the last commercial transport ship fled the system before the quarantine took full effect. Its captain had been Rilthani, but his family was off-world. He would live while his entire species died. The guilt in his voice as he broadcast his final message home would haunt those who heard it. The defense satellites activated their targeting systems. The quarantine was now absolute. 47 species had voted. 47 species had agreed. One voice had objected, but one voice meant nothing in the grand calculation of galactic politics. Rebecca sat alone in her quarters that night, composing a message to Earth's government. She outlined everything that had happened, every cold decision, every abandoned responsibility. She ended with a question that would change everything. When we joined this council, we believed we were entering a community of civilized species. Now we know what their civilization means. What will humanity choose to be? 3 days later, Earth's response arrived. It was short, direct, and would shake the galaxy to its foundations. The Global Assembly Hall on Earth had never been so crowded. Representatives from every nation, corporation, and scientific body packed the chamber as President Michelle Camara stood at the podium. The message from Ambassador Rebecca had been broadcast worldwide. Now the entire planet waited to hear how humanity would respond. "We face a choice that will define us for generations," Michelle began. "The Rilthani are dying. The galaxy has abandoned them. If we help, we risk everything we have built in the galactic community. If we do nothing, we become complicit in genocide." In the front row, Dr. Andrew Reeves shifted uncomfortably. He had spent the last 72 hours analyzing every piece of data about the Rilthani plague. What he found both terrified and excited him. The fungal infection was deadly, yes, but it shared structural similarities with diseases humanity had conquered centuries ago. They could help. The question was whether they would. Military advisors presented their concerns first. "The Council has made its position clear. If we violate the quarantine, we could face economic sanctions, trade embargoes, even military action. Humanity has only been in space for 80 years. We cannot survive isolated from galactic commerce. Our colonies depend on imported resources. Our technology relies on alien expertise. Defying the Council could destroy everything we have built." Economic ministers agreed. Charts and projections filled the screens showing the catastrophic impact of potential sanctions. Unemployment, resource shortages, technological regression. The numbers painted a grim picture. Helping the Rilthani might cost humanity its future. Then Patricia Dube stood to speak. She was young, barely 30, representing the African coalition. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent chamber. "My grandmother survived the pandemic of 2089. She watched neighbors die while the wealthy nations hoarded medicine. She told me that moment taught her what civilization really means. It is not about wealth or power or advancement. It is about whether you help when helping costs you everything." She pulled up images of Rilthani cities, crystalline towers that caught sunlight and transformed it into symphonies of color, parks where families gathered, schools where children learned. These are not statistics. They are people. They have art and music and love and fear, and right now they are dying alone because the galaxy decided they were not worth the risk. What does it say about us if we make the same choice? The chamber erupted in arguments. Some called her naive. Others said she was risking human lives for aliens humanity barely knew. The debate raged for hours until Dr. Reeves finally stood and requested silence. "I have analyzed the plague's structure," he said, displaying molecular models. "It attacks neural pathways through a specific protein mechanism. We have dealt with similar infections in our own history. Fungal meningitis, cordyceps variants, the Prague syndrome of 2104. I believe we can develop a treatment protocol. The success rate would be approximately 60 to 70%, not perfect, but infinitely better than the 94% mortality they face now. And the risk to humans, someone asked. Minimal with proper containment protocols. The plague is not airborne, it requires direct contact with infected tissue. Our hazard suits are more than adequate. The risk to my medical teams would be low, the risk to Earth itself negligible. Then why has no one else attempted this? A skeptical delegate demanded. Dr. Reeves met his eyes, because they do not care enough to try. The vote was called at midnight. The chamber had debated for 16 hours straight. Representatives were exhausted, emotions raw. When the results appeared on the screens, the chamber fell silent. 67% in favor of intervention. Humanity would help the Rilthani. President Kamara authorized Operation Extended Hand immediately. Within 48 hours, 3 hospital ships, 2 supply vessels, and 1 diplomatic transport were being prepared. Over 4,000 humans volunteered. Doctors, nurses, engineers, xenobiologists, linguists, and support staff. They came from every nation, every background, united by the belief that some things mattered more than safety. Captain David Ochoa was chosen to lead the fleet. He was a veteran of the Mars relief mission and had commanded medical operations during the Titan ice crisis. He stood before his assembled crew in the hangar bay as they prepared for departure. "You all know what we are risking," he said. "The Council has threatened sanctions. Some species are calling for military action against us. Once we cross that quarantine line, there may be no diplomatic solution. Earth may suffer for what we are about to do. Your families may suffer, and some of us may not come home." He paused, looking at the faces before him, young and old, experienced and fresh from training, all volunteers, all aware of the cost. But the Rilthani will know that when the galaxy abandoned them, humanity stood with them. That has to mean something. That has to matter. The crew responded with quiet determination. No cheers, no dramatic speeches, just people preparing to do what they believed was right. Ambassador Rebecca sent an encrypted message as the fleet prepared to launch. The Council was aware of Earth's plan. The Veskari delegation had already drafted sanctions. Several species were positioning military assets. The diplomatic channels were filled with threats and warnings. Rebecca's message ended with a simple statement. "They will try to stop you. Be ready." Captain Ochoa read the message to his senior staff. None of them asked to turn back. They had made their choice. Dr. Reeves was already organizing medical teams and reviewing treatment protocols. The engineering crews were triple-checking the hospital ship systems. The support staff were calculating supply needs and establishing communication protocols with Rilthani authorities. As the fleet launched from Earth orbit, millions watched from the surface, some in support, others in fear. The ships accelerated toward the edge of known space, toward a quarantine zone that no one was supposed to enter, toward a species the galaxy had already written off as dead. In the lead ship's medical bay, Dr. Reeves looked at the treatment compounds they had synthesized. Humanity's answer to a plague that had stumped the galaxy. It might work, it might fail, but at least they were trying. That, he thought, was what separated civilization from barbarism. Not technology or power, but the willingness to help even when helping might destroy you. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the quarantine zone. Immediately, every alarm system activated as automated defense satellites locked weapons on the approaching vessels. Captain Ochoa stood in the command center watching the tactical display light up with targeting indicators. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely exposed. "Council warships detected," his tactical officer reported. 4 Veskari cruisers, 2 Thrain destroyers, and 1 Mordian battlecruiser. They are forming a blockade pattern across our approach vector. David took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. "Open all communication frequencies, broadcast on every channel the Council uses. I want everyone to hear this." The communication officer nodded. "Channels open, sir." This is Captain David Achor of the Earth Medical Fleet. We are entering Rilthani space on humanitarian grounds. We carry medical supplies, treatment protocols, and personnel trained to help combat the plague. We request free passage to Rilthan Prime. The response came within seconds. A Veskari admiral appeared on the screen, his armored carapace gleaming under his ship's lights. Human vessel, you are in violation of Galactic Council decree. The quarantine zone is absolute. Turn back immediately or face destruction. David had expected this. Admiral, we are a medical convoy. We carry no weapons. Our mission is purely humanitarian. The Interstellar Medical Accord prohibits firing on medical vessels during relief operations. The Medical Accord does not apply to quarantine violations, the Admiral snapped. You have 30 seconds to reverse course. In the medical bay, Dr. Reeves listened to the exchange while reviewing patient files the Rilthani had transmitted. The data was heartbreaking. Entire families wiped out, medical centers overwhelmed, supplies exhausted. Mortality projections showed total population collapse within 6 months. Every second they delayed meant more deaths. He opened a direct channel to the Council fleet. This is Dr. Andrew Reeves, Chief Medical Officer. I am transmitting plague data to your ships right now. Current mortality rate is 94%. Without intervention, the Rilthani species will be extinct by next summer. We have treatment protocols that show 70% efficacy in preliminary models. Are you really going to murder an entire civilization to enforce a bureaucratic rule? Silence followed his transmission. David could see the Council ships holding position, but no one was firing yet. The automated satellites were another matter. Their targeting systems had no conscience, no hesitation. They would fire the moment the human ships crossed the designated boundary. Then something unexpected happened. One of the Council vessels, a sleek Harani ship positioned at the edge of the formation, powered down its weapons. Its captain, a female named Ciara, broadcast on open channels. I will not fire on medical personnel. What we are doing here violates every principle the Council claims to uphold. We are better than this. The Veskari Admiral's fury was immediate. Captain Ciara, you are in violation of direct orders. Power up your weapons immediately or face charges of treason. Then charge me, Ciara replied calmly. I became a soldier to protect people, not to enforce genocide. If the Council has fallen so far that helping the sick is treason, then the Council is not worth serving. Her words created chaos across the fleet channels. Some captains agreed with the Admiral, others with Ciara. The unified front was cracking. David saw his opportunity. All ships, full speed ahead, stay tight on my vector, medical emergency protocols, do not deviate. The human fleet surged forward. The automated satellites opened fire immediately. Energy beams cut through space. One of the supply vessels took a hit to its port side, shields flaring but. Holding, another beam grazed the lead hospital ship, causing minor hull damage. The fleet kept going. Return fire, someone on a Veskari ship demanded. They are unarmed medical vessels, another voice objected. We would be slaughtering civilians. The Harani ship moved to intercept some of the automated fire. Ciara was using her vessel as a shield. The act of defiance was being broadcast across the entire galaxy. Every species with communication technology could watch as a council captain refused to let medical ships be destroyed. The human fleet crossed the quarantine boundary. Alarms blared, warnings flashed, but they were through. The automated systems continued firing, but the angle was wrong now. The Council ships held their positions, weapons powered but not firing. No one wanted to be the one who massacred a medical convoy on live broadcast. Damage report, David ordered. Supply Vessel 2 has hull breaches on 3 decks. Engineering is sealing them now. Hospital Ship 1 has minor damage to external sensors, all other vessels intact. No casualties. They had made it. David allowed himself one moment of relief before the next challenge. Navigation, set course for Rilthan Prime, best possible speed, communications, try to raise someone on the surface. The response came faster than expected. A weak, distorted signal from the planetary government. The translator struggled with the Rilthani harmonic language, but the meaning was clear. Human ships, this is Rilthan Prime. We do not understand. Why have you come? The galaxy abandoned us. Captain Ochoa chose his words carefully. Because abandonment is not acceptable, because some lines cannot be crossed, because you are people and people deserve help. We are bringing medical aid. Where do you need us most? There was a long pause. When the Rilthani responded, their harmonic voice carried emotions no human language could fully express. Grief, hope, disbelief, gratitude all woven together. Land at the capital, we will guide you in, and thank you. We had given up hope that anyone cared. The fleet descended through Rilthan Prime's atmosphere. The planet was beautiful. 3 moons hung in a violet sky. Crystalline cities covered the continents, though many were dark now, their populations too sick to maintain them. As they approached the capital, they could see the devastation: empty streets, abandoned buildings, memorial markers. Everywhere. The landing zone was in what had been a park. Now it was a makeshift triage center. Rilthani in various stages of the plague waited in long lines. Medical staff moved between them, doing what little they could with dwindling supplies. Dr. Reeves and his teams were already suiting up. Remember your protocols: full biohazard containment, work in pairs. If anyone shows any symptoms, immediate quarantine. We are here to help, not to become victims ourselves. The cargo doors opened and humans stepped onto Rilthani soil. Many of the waiting Rilthani stared in shock. They had watched the galaxy vote to seal them away. They had heard no objections, no allies, no hope. And now here were beings from a species they barely knew, risking everything to help strangers. 3 weeks after landing, Dr. Reeves stumbled out of the research lab looking like he had not slept in days. Because he had not. His team had been working around the clock analyzing samples, testing compounds, running simulations. Now he held a data tablet that could change everything. "We found it," he said to Captain Ochoa. "The plague has a vulnerability. It attacks neural pathways through a specific enzyme process. We can block that process with a modified antifungal compound. It is not a cure exactly, more like a treatment that stops progression and allows the body to heal itself. Initial trials show 78% success rate." David felt hope surge through him. "How fast can we produce it?" "We are already synthesizing the first batches in the ship's medical fabricators. We should have enough for 500 patients by tonight. Enough for 5,000 by next week. The Rilthani can replicate our process in their own facilities once we show them how." The treatment began immediately. Tilara was among the first volunteers. She had been caring for her mother, watching the tremors worsen, knowing that soon the neural degeneration would reach the point of no return. Now she sat beside her mother's bed as human doctors administered the compound. "How long before we know if it works?" she asked. Dr. Reeves checked the monitors. "The enzyme blocking should take effect within 6 hours. Neural pathway restoration takes longer, maybe 3 to 4 days. But we should see symptom improvement within 24 hours if it is working." Tilara watched the clock. Every minute felt like an eternity. Her father sat on the other side of the bed, holding his wife's hand. They had been married for 30 years. They had raised 3 children. They had survived wars and economic collapses and natural disasters. But nothing had prepared them for watching someone they loved slowly lose control of their own body. 20 hours later, the tremors in Tilara's mother's hands began to subside. By the 2nd day, she could hold a cup without spilling it. By the 4th day, she spoke her first clear sentence in months. The treatment was working. News of the success spread across Rilthan Prime within hours. Thousands flooded the treatment centers. Human medical teams worked 20-hour shifts, training Rilthani doctors and nurses in the protocols. Engineers helped rebuild medical infrastructure that had collapsed during the plague. Supply ships shuttled between Earth and Rilthan Prime, bringing more compound ingredients. Within 4 weeks, the mortality rate dropped from 94% to 31%. Within 6 weeks, it was down to 18%. Cities that had gone dark began to glow again. Crystalline towers sang in the wind as power was restored. Schools reopened. Families who had prepared for death started planning futures. But while the Rilthani healed, Earth suffered. The Galactic Council had voted economic sanctions with 83% approval. Human ships were banned from Council space. Trade routes closed. Technological exchange programs terminated. The economic impact was immediate and devastating. Unemployment on Earth rose to 22% within 2 months. Supply chains for colony worlds broke down. Resources that humanity had come to depend on were suddenly unavailable. President Kamara addressed the planet from the same hall where they had voted to help the Rilthani. "I will not lie to you. We are paying a heavy price for our choice. Families are struggling. Businesses are failing. Our colonies are rationing supplies. The Council wants us to regret standing with the Rilthani. They want to make an example of us so no one else dares to challenge their decisions." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "But I ask you this. What kind of species do we want to be? One that values comfort over compassion. One that turns away from suffering because helping might cost us something. The Rilthani would be extinct right now if we had made that choice. An entire civilization with all their art and music and knowledge and love would be gone forever. Can anyone here say their cheaper groceries would be worth that price?" Public opinion on Earth was divided. Some supported the president's stance. Others demanded her resignation. Protests filled the streets of major cities on both sides. The debate was raw and painful and necessary. On Rilthan Prime, Talara had become a liaison between humans and Rilthani. She helped coordinate supply distribution, translated medical terminology, and worked with human engineers to restore city infrastructure. She saw the news from Earth. She understood what humanity was sacrificing. "Why are you doing this?" she asked Dr. Reeves one night as they reviewed patient data. "Your own people are suffering because of us. Some of your leaders want to abandon this mission. You could go home and the Council might lift the sanctions." Andrew looked up from his work. "We could, and the Council might forgive us, and Earth's economy might recover. And we would have to live knowing we are the kind of species that only helps when it is convenient, that we let political pressure override moral responsibility. I do not know about you, but I could not live with that." Meanwhile, cracks were appearing in the Council's unity. Captain Ciara, the Harani officer who had refused to fire on the medical fleet, was being court-martialed by her own government. But her trial was broadcast across the galaxy, and her testimony was damning. "I am being charged with treason for refusing to kill medical personnel," she said. "But who are the real traitors here? The humans went to help a species in need. We voted to let them die. The humans risked everything to do what was right. We threatened them with destruction for breaking a quarantine we never tried to cure. If defending those values is treason, then I am guilty. But history will judge which side deserved loyalty." Her words resonated with younger members of various species. Protests began on multiple Council worlds. Not large ones, not enough to threaten governments, but enough to show that not everyone agreed with abandoning the Rilthani. 3 Council species began quiet back-channel communications with Earth. They were worried about the precedent. If the Council could abandon one species, who was next? Political stability was fragile across the galaxy. Economic problems, social unrest, environmental crises, any of them could become an excuse for abandonment. The Rilthani had been loyal Council members for 3 generations, and it had not saved them. On Earth, Captain Ochoa's crew faced their own doubts. They received messages from family members struggling with the sanctions. Some crew members requested to return home. David approved every request without argument. This had to be a choice, not an obligation. But most stayed. They stayed because they saw Rilthani families reunited. They stayed because they watched cities come back to life. They stayed because leaving would mean admitting that politics mattered more than people. And slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. 6 months after humanity crossed the quarantine line, the Rilthani plague was 91% contained. Cities across Rilthan Prime glowed with life again. Crystalline towers that had been silent for nearly a year sang their harmonic songs as wind passed through their structures. The mortality rate had dropped to 4%, lower than many natural diseases. The Rilthani civilization was not just surviving, it was healing. And the galaxy could not ignore it anymore. Every news broadcast, every diplomatic channel, every public forum showed images of recovered Rilthani cities. Families reunited, children playing in parks, artists creating again. The species the Council had written off as doomed was thriving. The contrast with the Council's predictions was impossible to dismiss. They had said intervention was impossible. Humanity had proved them wrong. On multiple worlds, young members of various species began asking uncomfortable questions. Why had the Council not tried to help? Why was abandonment the first response instead of the last resort? Their elders called them naive, idealistic, too young to understand the complexities of galactic politics. But the questions kept coming. The Harani government faced the most pressure. Captain Ciara's court-martial had turned her into a symbol. Her conviction on charges of disobeying orders was widely seen as unjust. Protests demanding her release filled Harani cities. The government, desperate to restore stability, made a stunning announcement. They were withdrawing from the sanctions against humanity and formally apologizing to the Rilthani people. The dam broke. Within 3 days, 4 more species withdrew from the sanctions. They cited domestic concerns, ethical questions, economic factors. The real reason was simpler. Maintaining the sanctions required explaining why they had abandoned the Rilthani without trying to help. That explanation was becoming harder to justify as images of recovered Rilthani families spread across every screen in the galaxy. The Veskari and their hardline allies tried to hold the line. They argued that humanity had violated fundamental council law, that the quarantine was necessary. That success did not excuse the crime, but enforcement became impossible as more species withdrew. Trade routes reopened. Human ships were allowed passage again. Earth's economy began its slow, painful recovery. The Rilthani government requested to address the Galactic Council. The request could not be denied. They were technically still council members, just quarantined ones. When their delegation arrived, led by a recovered elder named Thoras, the chamber was packed. Every species wanted to hear what they would say. Thoras stood at the central podium, his crystalline body reflecting light in patterns that expressed emotions beyond words. 6 months ago, this council voted to seal us away and watch us die. 47 species agreed that we were not worth saving. Not one voice argued for attempting a cure. Not one offered to help. You decided our fate in 6 hours of debate and then forgot about us. The chamber was absolutely silent. Then humanity came, a species we barely knew, a species with no obligation to us. They crossed your quarantine, ignored your threats, and risked everything to do what you would not. They brought medicine, hope, and the simple message that we mattered, that we deserved a chance. That abandonment was not acceptable. He paused, letting his words sink in. We are applying for readmission to the Council, but we have conditions. We propose a humanitarian intervention accord. Any quarantine must include mandatory research for treatment. Species facing existential threats cannot be abandoned without genuine attempts at aid. And we propose an emergency response fleet, staffed by volunteers from any species willing to help, dedicated to preventing this from ever happening again. The debate that followed was fierce. Older delegates argued that quarantine protocols existed for good reasons, that changing them would endanger the galaxy. Younger delegates pointed out that no danger had materialized from humanity's intervention, that the Rilthani were healing, not spreading. Plague across the stars. Ambassador Rebecca spoke for humanity. You ask what law we violated. We violated the law that said watching people die is acceptable. We broke the rule that convenience matters more than compassion, and we would do it again, because some laws are wrong and following them makes you complicit in evil. The Veskari ambassador stood. And what happens next time? What if humanity decides another law is wrong? What if they decide council authority itself is disposable? This is chaos, not civilization. No, Rebecca replied. Civilization is not about following rules blindly. It is about knowing when to break them. Your civilization let the Rilthani die to avoid inconvenience. Ours risked everything to save them. History will judge which approach was truly civilized. The votes were called. Reinstatement of the Rilthani to full council membership passed with 78% approval. Formal censure of humanity failed with only 29% support. The Humanitarian Intervention Accord passed with 64% approval after significant amendments. It was not everything the Rilthani wanted, but it was a start. The real change came in what followed. 23 species volunteered personnel and resources for the proposed intervention fleet. The ships would be stationed across the galaxy, ready to respond to medical and humanitarian crises before they became catastrophes. Dr. Reeves was appointed Chief Medical Coordinator. Captain Ciara, pardoned by her government under public pressure, volunteered to serve as Fleet Commander. 1 year after humanity had crossed the quarantine line, Rilthan Prime celebrated its annual renewal festival. The city was alive with light and music. Crystalline towers shimmered with colors that represented joy and gratitude. Humans walked among the crowds, no longer seen as foreigners, but as the friends who had come when no one else would. Talara, now a medical student studying under human doctors, stood before a group of young Rilthani children. "A year ago, we thought we were going to die," she told them. "The entire galaxy had abandoned us. We were alone and afraid and hopeless. Then humans came. They crossed a quarantine that could have killed them. They faced threats and sanctions and economic collapse. They did all of this for strangers." "Why?" one child asked. Talara smiled, "Because they believe that civilization means caring. For each other, especially when it is hard. They taught us that the measure of a society is not its power or wealth, but whether it helps those in need even when helping costs everything." In orbit above Rilthan Prime, the new Intervention Response Fleet was preparing for its first official mission. A medical emergency had been reported in a distant system. Ships from dozens of species were responding together. The lead vessel bore a name in multiple languages, but the human designation was clear: Extended Hand. Ambassador Rebecca stood in the observation deck watching the fleet depart. She thought about the cost. Earth had suffered, careers had been destroyed, families had struggled, but the galaxy had changed. The idea that abandonment was acceptable had died. Species were learning to help each other, not just trade with each other. Captain Ochoa joined her at the window. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. Rebecca looked at the ships heading toward another crisis, toward people who needed help. "A year ago, humanity stood alone. We stood for a principle older than starships or councils, the principle that civilization means caring for each other. Now look at them, dozens of species working together. Yes, it was worth it. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of doubt. It was all worth it to prove that we could be better than our fears." Below them, on Rilthan Prime, the festival continued. Music and light and life where there had almost been extinction and silence. The galaxy had abandoned them. Humanity had declared, "We stand with you," and in doing so had reminded every species what they could be when they chose compassion over convenience.